All right. So my next recommendation is Government Cheese or Government Cheese. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. By Stephen Pressfield. Shout out to Stephen. Shout out to you. Stephen Pressfield in my circles is basically a hero. A handful of years ago, I want to say about a quarter century ago. Oh my gosh, time is flying. He did a fantastic book called the the War of Art. See, I almost screwed up again. Apologies to him and Sun Tzu. The War of Art. It's a tiny little book. In fact, ooh, let's see. Oh, that stretch. There we go. The War of Art. Tiny little book. I had to show you the physical book because it's tiny. Changed a lot of people's lives, including mine. It's basically the energy of sit your behind down in your seat and create. As you can tell, it's the energy of my show as well. I'm excited about this book, and it came out a few months ago. This is another one that I had missed. I'm excited about this book and starting it because he described it, which he's fantastic with words. Shout out to Stephen. He described it as, I'm finally going to do the book with all the stuff I left out. Think about that one. Even if you read like just The War of Art, I've read most of his books, particularly he's done fiction books as well, but I've read almost all the nonfiction books. If you've read The War of Art, if it's not on your shelf, I recommend you pick it up. He talks about some of the stuff he went through. It's not like he doesn't skim it, but it's not like he gets into the details. And it's like, oh, now Stephen's writing in that book. His book, like Government Cheese, for me, that book for me was Built From Now, where I talked about some of the traumatic things that had happened. I talked about some of the structural racism and bias that I had seen firsthand in the business world as well as just living. And I talked about almost like a call to action for us to change those things. That's the level of vulnerability and honesty that I could not have had earlier in my career. I mean, Built From Now was like my 24th book, like something like that. And I wasn't ready until then, after X number of years, decades writing books. This feels like that book for him, where sometimes as an author, you're ready to talk about those topics that are tough. And Government Cheese, if you're not familiar, when you're in the welfare system or you're getting subsidized because you're lower income, then you actually get your food products from the government. So you get government cheese, government peanut butter, government jelly, very much generic and based on some opinions, not the highest quality stuff. I was not part of that, but many parts of my family were. So I know just enough. Shout out to Camden, where my family's from, over in New Jersey. I know just enough to know what the deal is. And so I know Stephen. I've got a chance to meet him personally too. Love his work. And I know, kind of like Susanna with Data Baby, there's not going to be any punches held when he addresses something. So anyway, check out the book. He's a fantastic writer, and he's good with the heavy stuff. And this is, as it says, a memoir. So Stephen is not playing around. If you want to go deeper into more so of the War of Art and those kind of ideas, check out my live show I did a handful of months ago on the best business audiobooks out now. If you're familiar with my work, you know that, or have been a long time viewer of the channel or the podcast, you know that I really didn't get to audiobooks until much later in life, like a handful of years ago, around the time that my first son was born. He just turned 10, so about 10 years ago. And that was because I'm used to physical books. I love physical books, as you can tell. I would pan the camera, but there's like stacks of books over here. I have a newsletter at joindamon.me, and the newsletter comes out every Wednesday at 5:55 a.m. And that was my newsletter today. As I was announcing I was going to be doing the live show today, was I was like, my office is just filled with books. There's books right now. There's a season of books. But I'm really into the physical process of books and the reading and just sitting somewhere. And as my kids and my partner can attest to, I'll just sit in the corner and read a book and crochet a blanket. You know what I mean? Like just chill. And when you're taking care of kids, particularly babies, you can't have your hands occupied because you're changing diapers, you're catching them when they roll off the couch, stuff like that. That's what got me into audiobooks. And since then, I've really gotten into audiobooks. And then since I've become a public speaker and, of course, doing this show for the last few years, I've been really into voices, what people sound like. And it's different when you're reading a Seth Godin book. Shout out to Seth. You're reading a Seth Godin book and you're like, okay, that's a great concept. Like one of them I've been reading is and just finishing up actually is A Song of Significance. Quick read, really good read. I could have read it in like an evening, but I haven't. I'm like savoring it. So like, as I get closer to the end, I keep getting slower and slower. But it's one thing, if you're familiar with Seth Godin's work, he has a very distinctive voice and he will get you out your chair. And so it's one thing to be like, oh, you should motivate people. And it's different to have Seth intensely saying that in your ear with his upstate New York accent. And it's like, oh, I should be motivating people. Anyway, in the live, I talk about my favorite books in that genre, and it's all that kind of stuff, you know? Yeah. Oh, you read Art of War. Yeah, I love Art of War. Thank you. What I love about the Art of War is the timelessness of it. And again, it applies to now. And in fact, in the link that I just shared, which is actually available below if you click on the link, with the best audiobooks, one of them is actually The Art of War. And I think I own probably about 5 copies of it. Maybe a couple of them I gave away, so I probably have 3 now. And a couple of them are audiobooks. And the newest audiobook that I found, again, it's in the link in the description for the best audiobooks, was fantastic. Um, what I love about The Art of War, because you're also asking, it looks like, what was my favorite chapter? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. They all kind of blur together because it's a very short book. I wish I had a physical copy here. It's a very short book. One of my favorite concepts, though, which was essentially cribbed by Bruce Lee, is to be like water. So to be fluid. Because if you think about it, to get philosophical for a second, I think Sun Tzu and Bruce Lee would appreciate it. When water is in a certain environment, it automatically goes to the lowest levels and finds the cracks. So it finds the openings, right? So if you're in a tough situation, you can find a way out of it. But also when things heat up, when things get intense, it can disappear seemingly and then appear somewhere else, right? Because water turns into steam. But if it ends up being a harsh environment and it needs to get tough, then it can turn into ice. But once it's out of the harsh environment, then it goes back into its normal liquid form. And you can't really capture water. You can't really fight it because it just bends around wherever you're attacking. I love the concept. And there's, I think there might be a chapter on that. Might be a chapter on that, Darren. I don't know, but there's a whole passage talking about water in the Art of War. So as you can tell, it's one of my favorite books. Fantastic. See, Darren, you're gonna make me pull it back out again, and it's a fantastic book. Thank you for your comment. Yeah, you're bringing back a lot of memories because I have not read in a while. Speaking of that, this would be my final question for the show as we wrap up. What classic do you keep coming back to? And One that I keep coming back to, especially lately, is The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Shout out to him. Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. I always screw up his last name, so I make sure I read it. But actually, I know him a little bit. So shout out to Stephen Hanselman. This book's fantastic. The short version of it is that there's Stoic philosophy from literally millennia ago. They distilled it down into 366 principles. You might see the pattern there. So, with those 366 principles, that's a principle a day plus a leap year. That's why it's 366. So, every single day, you can see the little ribbon there. Keep me honest. Every single day, I can flip in here and read one of the basic things. And this book, goes full circle, was one of the first audiobooks I ever bought. Excuse me. You can imagine me being at home with a 4-month-old son trying to build my first startup. And wife and I had never had kids before, so it was kind of very hands-on. And this helped me get through some stuff. I'll put it like that. I've never had, in fact, I take that back. I've never had a nice hardcover copy. I always had a paperback, or of course, I had the audiobook of it. And it's been fantastic to read it over again. Yeah, my kid is 10. So the last time, I think I went through the Daily Stoic probably about 3 years ago in audiobook form. And then, and then I think I had the paperback. There's a little tiny paperback that I think I got a few years before that. So I've only read it like 4 times. And so it's nice to kind of come back to something that, you know, you're a different person. And was it Heraclitus, right? A man can never cross the same river twice because he's not the same man and it's not the same river, right? Same energy. And that's why the books that I have up here, almost all of them I've read multiple times. The amount of books that I've read, probably similar to a lot of y'all, is a lot. But these are the ones where it's like I'm coming back to them. And sometimes it's a mood. It's a vibe, as the kids say.